Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Eddie, it's good to see you. We have with us today Ed Hannan. That's with an A. Ed Hannan with an A.
No O's.
No O's in there. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, as you know, Eddie, because we've talked about it. Tell me, and tell everybody watching, what year did you retire?
Just this past June,
Okay.
1996.
Been a rough adjustment for you so far?
Not really. Jokingly, all of a sudden, my teeth started falling apart. That was the toughest adjustment. I guess I kept them moving while I was teaching.
Now, you've been living in Brentwood for almost as long as you've been teaching in Brentwood, too, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is my 29th year living in Brentwood. And I taught at Brentwood High School for 27 years.
But 2 years before that, where were you teaching at that?
The year before I came to Brentwood, I taught at LaSalle Military Academy.
Uh-huh.
In fact, that's
Okay.
the reason that I moved from the Bronx out to Long Island, wound up in Brentwood to teach at LaSalle. And after a year there, things got tight in one way or another.
Let's hold off on that. I want to get back to that in a couple of minutes. But first of all, let me ask you about your family. Tell us about the family. First of all, it's your wife, Janice, and your
My
son.
wife's name is Janice. That's Janis, in case anybody wants to write a check. We both come from families of 7 children, and we ourselves had only 2, a son and a daughter. Both my son and daughter went to Brentwood Schools from the beginning all the way through. And they're both moved out of the house now. My son's married, and they're doing very well.
Your son's name is?
My son's name is same as mine.
Okay.
Ed.
Is he a junior?
Yeah,
He's
used
junior.
No, he's actually a third. My father was Edward. I'm junior, and he's EC3.
Oh, I see.
And Deborah May is my daughter. She's living in Massapequa Park. She runs a construction company.
And you say that with a smile on your face?
She has a license and a degree to teach English, but I don't know. She used it for a while, and I think she's put it on hold for a while.
Now, you have, obviously, there are qualities and traits that run through the family. And one of them appears to be a gift with the hands and with the head. And apparently for a while, I believe, I remember you doing something like that, weren't you?
Well, one of the things, my wife did a tape where she recorded different members of my family and friends to celebrate my combination 55th birthday and retirement. And one of the things on there, my father was dead by the time I saw the tape, but it was very nice that my wife had taped him before he died. And on a tape, he said that from the time I was a little kid, I always got involved in trying to figure things out, how they went together. And I was the type of person who always said that I could do it. And I did get involved in building things and fixing things. So almost as many years as I've been teaching, I've been doing carpentry and home improvements. And it's kind of a nice balance to the teaching profession for me.
I can identify with that, yes.
Yeah.
Now, your daughter obviously saw you and watched
both
you.
my son and daughter have at various times worked with me, sure. I mean, sometimes it's not surprising that your son picks up and works along with a father.
That's wonderful.
But many people would be surprised to see my daughter, on a roof
great.
or putting
That's
siding
wonderful.
up or sheetrock. They're both handy.
Why did you decide when you did, Eddie? Maybe it's an obvious question, but not necessarily. I'm curious.
Why did I decide to
retire when you did? Yeah.
I don't know. It sort of crept up on me. There were several things that came together. I still enjoy teaching. I teach catechism at my church, and I work in the afternoons here at the high school, teaching drama, directing the plays.
Oh, so you're still involved at school?
Still involved here at the high school. I wasn't unhappy with the teaching per se.
Right.
I think some money matters came up. I saw the opportunity to use the retirement incentive for something, and I think sitting talking with my wife, we said, hey, things, we can get along with what we have. So why not take advantage of it? I still feel young and healthy.
Sure.
And I think part of it too was, to step aside and let another young person get a job.
But the essence then is just it was time, and you knew it was time.
But it wasn't a matter of feeling anything negative, like I got to get out of here, that type of thing.
Right, I understand.
Obviously, I'm still here.
Okay, so it wasn't a running away. It was a moving toward the next step. That's all. Now, the last position you held when you were teaching was in the English department.
Right, I was teaching English, mostly 10th grade.
And you were in the R.O.B.S building
occasionally, I had a
time.
drama class.
In the R.O.B.S building, right?
Actually, in the Sandling building, I wound up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started in the Sandling building, and then I was in both buildings for a period of time. Taught overlap session at one point in time, because when I first came here, we taught from 7 o'clock in the morning until shortly after noon. Then there was a period of time where I taught from like 10:30, 11 until 4.
Right.
And then there was a period of time of 5 or 6 years where I taught afternoon session. I taught night school.
Interesting, because as we speak now in 1996, I've heard some talk that there might be a possibility of the district having to return to that split session again.
I never thought that separating 10th graders or 9th graders or any class from all the other 4 years of high school, I never thought that was good. Whatever class is separate, they feel a separateness. They feel like they're not part of the high school. That afternoon session, and this time of year, it's almost like they go to night school.
Yes.
You come out, it's dark. And
now, 29 years, you said you were teaching. Is that right?
27 at Brentwood. Years. Yeah, and 1 year at LaSalle.
And 1 year at LaSalle. In the year that you've been retired, or not quite a year yet, what have you been doing besides what you've already told us? You're still involved with the plays at the high school. You're still, and you've had a commitment to teaching catechism from what I remember for quite some time.
Yeah, I've been teaching catechism at my church for about almost 17 years.
Would that be at St. Anne's? Is that where that would be?
I'm at St. Luke's.
St. Luke's, okay.
Right.
So that hasn't changed.
Before I retired, and even now, I'm still in contact with many retirees.
Yes.
I've always had, I've done work for various people who were teachers, and that's how I got different jobs, by word of mouth. So I'm in touch with many people who are now retired, and now made an effort to join the different retiree groups. And you and I belong to the writers group, which I
the writers group,
enjoy a lot.
Yeah.
My wife always thought that I should spend more time writing.
I'm very happy you're part of that. That's a wonderful experience. And I think that as other people retire, I would hope that they would be aware that there is that's one of many opportunities that that we can stay connected and make the social contacts that many of us miss. Eddie, why did you happen to apply for a job in Brentwood in the first place? You mentioned having come from the Bronx to work at LaSalle for a year, and I gather from what you said before that after 1 year you decided it was time to leave there.
A lot of things in my life happened. When I look back, I see that, as we always say, there are no coincidences.
Yes.
But I went from Christian Brother High School St. Peter's on Staten Island, to a seminary, and I achieved my bachelor's degree in the seminary with the Franciscans.
Now, were you intent upon
My
pursuing?
intention was to become a Franciscan priest. From the time I was in the 8th grade, I thought of, I had this romantic idea of doing missionary work, and perhaps that's what I wound up doing.
You bet your life you did. Yes.
I'm still working within the church,
Sure.
but the thing is, in the seminary, I earned my bachelor's degree and a year or so beyond. And when I decided to leave there, it was on the basis that I didn't feel that that I could obey the rules set by people. And I saw down the line that there could be some conflict in it, and I wanted to avoid any kind of scandal. I mean, I didn't want to scandalize anybody who may look and say, well, that's a priest being disobedient. Anyway, after leaving the seminary, I applied and was accepted at Wagner College to go for my MA in English.
There's a Lutheran college.
But the day I was supposed to start, Uncle Sam had me on a train going to South Carolina.
I see.
So I spent 2 years in the Army and 1 year in Vietnam. When I came back from there...
There's an education.
That was an education. And as you know, I'm writing some things that have been dredging up some feelings from that time of my life. It was a very intense year, and a lot of things keep flashing back to me now. But in any event, when I came back from there, I spent a couple of days at Manhattan College visiting Father Bruce Ritter, who was the person who started Covenant House. He was one of my teachers in the seminary.
I see.
And he suggested that they had an MA program that I might be interested in. It was a master's in religious education. So, not having any other definite plan at the time, I applied and was accepted for that. And I earned my master's at Manhattan. And towards the end of that program, I was offered several jobs, one in a college in the Midwest, one in a brand new diocesan high school in Delaware, and one out here at LaSalle Military Academy. So since I had been away from my family for so many years, I wanted to be closer, so I chose LaSalle. And I ran into some conflict at LaSalle. We were talking about this before.
Yes, that's right.
People who have titles that have master in them. The man in charge there was the head master. And many of the rules that we had to follow were in his head, and you had to figure them out. See, since he was the master and we were the subjects, you know. So we banged heads, and without right. There was no one that you could go to. See, he was the master, and I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be teaching there the next year. I was teaching religion there, by the way, and I
want to interrupt for a moment to go back to something you said too, jokingly before, talking about the missionary work. Have you not found, as I have, that there are a great many teachers who are on a mission? They come into this work with almost a spiritual sense of purpose, and it's not discussed a lot. But I have experienced, or I've met along the road, many people who were either former religious themselves or planning to be.
That's right.
In the convent or in the priesthood or are active ministers, and somehow or other. And I also have met some people who are very, very seriously religious in an Orthodox Jewish way that are in the classroom and active. And there seems to be a bond between many teachers that is not often discussed. I
think that
for many years it certainly wasn't for the money. Isn't for the money now that people come into
There's
this.
no doubt about it. I think that if you look at the type of person who is a teacher at Brentwood High School, you find people who have many talents outside of what they use here. And
yeah, very true.
I don't know too many teachers who, unless they were married to someone who also worked and brought in a salary. You know, when I first started teaching, we all had 2 or 3 jobs.
That's right. Yes.
I mean,
and you were in construction part
I
of the
worked
time,
in
right?
the post office
Okay.
from 4:30 in the morning until 8:30 for a period of time. Then came here.
Oh boy.
Then went home and then came back for night school. So.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And I wasn't unique.
No.
Many
not
people
at
did
all.
the same thing. But
and that was to make ends meet.
At that time, I don't think that I looked at myself in the terms that you're expressing now.
Of course.
But now I can look back and I can see that there were and are many people who are of a high spiritual caliber and
very focused
in a sense of their dedication to the youth.
Yes. Yes.
I see that and I'm very happy about it, because I think sometimes when you go through a job like teaching, if you get to the end of a 25, 30-year period and you feel like it was for nothing or things got worse,
yes,
that's kind of depressing. And I look at the young teachers here at Brentwood High School, and I see some really energy-driven people, you know, who want to do a good job.
Weren't you like that though when you came into?
Yeah, like I say, if you would have asked me when I first started, I wouldn't have identified myself necessarily that way because you're in it.
Yes.
But looking back, yes, that's the way we are. And we always had those of us who had that type of a personality. We never really lost the romantic, you know, the ideal. No matter what wall we ran into, we would always bounce off and say, okay, let me try this. Instead of just saying, you know.
And stay on purpose.
Getting the old disease that we call, you know, effort and check out.
What brought you to Brentwood then after LaSalle? How come Brentwood?
As I say, after that year at LaSalle, or towards the end of that year at LaSalle, I knew that I wasn't going to be teaching there. And my wife was, we had bought a house here, and my wife was about to deliver Deborah May, and I needed a job. So I went around to the various high schools in the area. And I just happened to come into Brentwood.
This is what year now, Eddie? This
is in 1968 or 69.
Okay.
Summer of 69. And I walked into Brentwood High School, and I think it was a day or two after summer school was over. And I came in and I said, sure, we need teachers. I didn't know that they were interviewing. I just, as I say, you know, coincidence. And the history department head, or one of them, there were, as I later found out, there were 2 heads of each department. The school was divided. There were 2 of everything. There were 2 sports teams in each category. In any event, I was interviewed by an English chairperson, a history, and Ed, what was his name? One of the administrators who was here at the time, Ed Murphy. And Tom Campy, and it wasn't Milt Seiler. It was Guy DiPietro.
Guy, okay.
And they asked me what I could teach, and I said, well, what do you need? And they said, well, we need history and English teachers. I said, I can teach both. And that was my I can do it attitude. But I had many credits in English and history in the seminary and throughout. So really I did qualify. And the way I taught religion was from a historical perspective too, as well as spiritual. In any event, several days later, I didn't have a telephone. So first I called from a payphone, and they told me I didn't get the job. So I went home and I said, well, we got to try something else. A couple of hours later, a taxi pulls up with a what do you call it, telegram.
For goodness sake.
That they had made a mistake and would I please call that I had the job. So that was my start here. Wow. 1969 when the Mets won the World Series. My daughter was born.
Oh, boy.
A man was on the moon.
Yes,
the Jets won.
Oh, what a year.
And someone told me, I think even the Nets, who were in Nassau Coliseum, they won the ABA.
Oh, my gosh.
So it was a big year.
Great year. Do you remember anything about the interview? Was that the only interview he had? Was there a subsequent interview to that?
There was no other interview. I was asked one particular...
Did you say Milt Seiler and Guy DiPietro?
I think it was Guy DiPietro, not Milt. I met Milt later.
Okay.
But those were the two chairs of the history department at the time.
So on the interview, though, was that you were interviewed by...
Guy didn't say too much.
Okay.
Tom Campy, asked me, how I would deal with kids, what would be a book that I would recommend. And it just so happened I recommended what I thought was one of those books that I think we would call a spiritual book.
Oh, really?
In a sense, it was Mr. Blue.
Ah.
I don't know if you've ever read it. It's a very thin volume, but I had read it many years before that, and I thought that it would be something that would it had the romantic quality of an approach to life where no matter what happened to you, no matter how down and out you were, you looked for the balloon floating by, or you went and flew a kite.
Yes.
You could find something to lift your spirit.
Yes.
Do something for another person. That type of thing.
What was Brentwood like at that point, when you had just arrived? Now you remember back to it.
Well, I had, as I said, it was only a couple of years after I came back from Vietnam, and naturally Vietnam was still hot and heavy, and I didn't identify myself as a veteran because there were times where there was at least one time that I was thrown out of a veterans meeting, and I don't know which affiliation exactly, but they had invited me there, and I had some slides that I had taken in Vietnam, and I gave a talk as I showed the slides, and most of them were World War II vets, and they didn't like some of the things that I had to say, about the lying and deceit that I see, because I was connected for the first few months when I was in Vietnam with the 1st Logistic Command, and I was in headquarters company. I saw how different tallies of dead bodies, etc., were all garnished for promotions type things,
Public relations.
Yeah. And so when I presented some of these things and how many of the people were being mistreated, they didn't want to hear that. They closed me down and threw me out. And in 1969, I was in Vietnam from 65 to 66, right after President Johnson declared the buildup. So I was there early. Of course, the Special Forces were there before but I was part of that big buildup. And so many people didn't want to hear anything negative.
So when you came back to Brentwood, you did very little talking, as most vets did.
I didn't speak out for or against the war at that time.
It was not a climate to do that then. Not here.
Yeah, it wasn't. Of course, you had the SDS was active in Stony Brook and the
Students for a Democratic Society.
Exactly. Yes. And they got involved with some of the students here. We know Joe Joy.
Yes.
And he was a very intelligent person who decided that he was going to say and do something about what he thought was right or wrong with Vietnam. And he got his ass canned a few times. But there was a lot of that. There was demonstrations. There were kids walking out. Kids
protests of
all kinds, but none of that made me edgy or It didn't bother. I saw it as a necessary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I would rather see students protesting, and because it's a sign that they're thinking
Sure.
and making decisions.
Sure.
And I think in those situations, you need to have dialogue.
Sure, but it's tough when you're in the middle of it to see, as we can see now with a historical perspective, that was such a healthy thing that was going on. At the time, it was perceived by many as a destructive, antisocial, unpatriotic, and all the rest of that.
And I don't think that was that had anything to do with your age.
Oh no!
In other words, there were young and old people who perceived it one way or the other.
Even, you know, Brentwood in those days, when I say in those days, in the late 60s, still retained a good deal of its rural character, I would think.
Yeah,
and that made that applied as well to the students who came to the school. The climate in the high school during those years was, to say, at the very least, it was energetic. There was a lot of energy, both pro and con, as far as the war effort was concerned. And that must have found its way into your classroom. And
no doubt about it. Yeah. I didn't completely avoid, as I say, I didn't walk around wearing my medals or anything like that. I if the occasion came, sure, I didn't lie. I mean, I would say how I thought, but I wasn't going to provoke anyone.
No. Do you remember anything else about those times in the classroom or in the school? Any other things that come to mind about those early days of yours, anyway, in Brentwood?
Well, I remember that there were fewer older teachers. I remember Shirley
Hodges, no?
Shirley Hodges, yeah. She brought me along in the English department. I didn't stay in the history department only that 1 year.
Oh.
My first year. And
now, were you certified in English and history at the time?
At the time, I actually didn't have New York State certification.
Okay.
I had a master's degree, and
most people in those times, I would assume, did not have a master's degree either. I would think that most people were teaching with a baccalaureate degree.
Right. Well, I started teaching late, and I guess I got my degrees before I even started teaching. Right. And
I didn't even get my master's until well into the 70s. I was.
Yeah. Well, I got what was tantamount to a second master's by having to go and get my certification at Stony Brook.
Okay.
So for the first 5 or 6 years that I taught here, I went to school in the summer as well as worked. And as you say, you know, Brentwood as a community was a lot quieter. Today, I still live here, but you see many houses have 4 or 5 cars in front of them. Many young people who were students of mine when I started here may now be living and married and living in their parents' home. There's gridlock from 3 o'clock until 6:30 in Brentwood, and that wasn't the case.
That wasn't the case, no.
There are some physical changes that have been made for the better.
How this again, the paradoxically, that these are things how Brentwood has changed physically. How is there any way that you could say Brentwood has not changed? That you could say it has retained a certain, I don't know, quality? Because there's been a lot of change, and I just wondered whether it was apparent to somebody who's been here for all these years that there are certain ways in Brentwood has not changed that you could.
Well, one thing that has never changed is naturally because I was involved in teaching, and the type of student that we have here is a varied, and I always told my children, I said, you're a lot luckier than your cousins who live in communities where there's sort of like one type of person. I think we've been lucky because we've always had a nice mix, and in fact, it's gotten better because we've gotten more of a variety.
Yes.
I was told that the last count we had like 53 different language groups in Brentwood, and that to me that's exciting.
The diversity is the strength.
Yes.
It was then, it is now. Yes,
and teaching drama, yes. I still get the same enthusiastic type kids coming in, and sometimes Cass and I say our slogan is "Give me your tired, your poor."
Yes,
from the
wonderful, from the Statue of Liberty.
From the Statue of Liberty, but
you bring me to the next question. The things that you have worked, the projects or the advisorships that you have held outside of the classroom, and theater has been one of those that has figured prominently.
From the time that I started here, actually, I got a taste of it in the seminary. We used to entertain one another by writing short plays.
I've often wondered performing where it came from. That's where it came from. Okay.
Yeah, it was part of our somewhat part of your education.
Sure.
I mean, eventually you were going to have to get up and talk in front of people and be a public figure. And there were many creative people in the seminary. When I came here, those jobs were nailed down, and I finally got a break because of a contract clause that said a person couldn't be an administrator and be involved in an advisor position. Okay. So when R.O.B.S Herzog became an administrator,
it was open.
He turned that loose. So I applied, and Cass and I started directing plays then. So it's been almost 20 years.
And a partnership for ever since. Yeah. Those have you seen within the productions that we've done or that you've done here in Brentwood? Have you seen a change of any kind in what am I'm reaching for? You've watched a lot of productions go across the board. Most of them, did you choose them, or was it a student's choice?
We inherited a very good group of kids from R.O.B.S Herzog, and we bit off. If I were to do it again today, I definitely would not have chosen the 4 plays that we started out doing. 4 one-act plays that first year. And because the group we had, we were successful. But people looked and said, "Cats,
too difficult, you think?"
It was a lot of work.
Yeah, okay.
But it was very satisfying and kept me coming back. Your question about what has changed or not changed. There are always students who have been creative and want to do dramatic things. What we did differently from the way R.O.B.S did it was we waited to see who these kids were and then tried to find plays
to fit them
that could challenge their talents.
Wonderful.
That made it much more difficult for us.
Yes.
We spent many hours in the city in different places where they have shelves and shelves of plays. We would sit there for hours going through the stacks and picking out things that would suit our kids.
Right.
And many of the plays people have never heard of, or we've done some of the standard classical plays, like You Can't Take It With You and stuff like that. Only 1 year did we direct the musical. We did Hello, Dolly, and that was because the music department couldn't get a director. For several years, they would start up and things would fall apart.
Oh, jeez.
I never did want to get involved with the musical because, well, for one thing, there are a lot of politics. For the other thing, I like music and I like to sing and listen to it, but I'm not competent to direct kids in the singing part. But the year that we did it, we had a lot of very good people working with us, and it came out.
This is
This
is a tough question to ask because you've been retired for a relatively short period of time. But I dare say that somebody who has been retired for 20 years has one take on it. Somebody who's been retired for several months will have perhaps a different take on it. But what do you miss most at this point? Has there been time to miss anything?
I don't know if I've had the time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I always liked just the daily exchange.
Let me flip
People,
it to the other side, because it may be part of your answer. Is there anything that you could identify as that at this point that you don't miss? Which is it? It might be easier to identify what you don't miss rather than.
Well, that is easy. I mean, I don't miss getting up real early.
Yes.
I don't miss having to constantly grade papers and make plans and things like that. But I don't miss the tension and conflict that very often took place between administration and teachers. And for the life of me, I could never understand why that existed, because it doesn't have to.
Yes.
But and I don't miss the disrespect, to which I sometimes became, I guess, not necessarily depressed, but and you and I know, that story of Jerry the student. You can't force a kid to do something for himself, but
Dr. Jerry Edwards of the Delphi National Training Institute you're speaking of had a character that he had created called Jerry the Kid, and he used to use this in his workshops to illustrate how if a youngster doesn't want to do something, there's no way that you can make them
not
do
even the combination of the the best professionals you have.
Yeah, right.
But
and it's a tremendous expenditure of energy trying to do the impossible.
Right. And that saddened me sometimes that.
Eddie, isn't part of teaching, though, and part of becoming a teacher, learning where your limitations are with kids and with the classroom? That you can't be God. You can't do everything. You have to know when to give up on a situation.
You have to be careful not to think that you have control.
Okay.
Because I know I eventually came to the conviction that I had very little control over myself, let alone trying to control young people. So
a lot of that is an illusion anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know that coming to that, accepting that premise, I think I was more comfortable with some situations where I could do nothing with a student. I would realize that I had done what I could, and beyond that.
Yeah, beyond that, let go.
But the part that I miss, and I think that keeps you alive, is the interaction with people, and especially young people, because they're constantly challenging your creativity.
Yes.
And I enjoyed that. I liked doing.
But you're having fun. You're having fun doing that now. You're still doing
exactly. And that's what's going to keep me alive until I'm dead.
Sure. Eddie, where were you born?
I was born on Staten Island. And
what year was that, if you don't mind my asking?
That was 1940.
Okay, so this is...
Staten Island has changed a lot.
Boy, that must have been very rural.
When
before
I was
the
a
bridge.
Kid,
that's before, well before the bridge.
I walked across the street. There were 3 houses on my block, and across the street was all woods, and you could walk for a couple of miles and not see a house or a person. Because there was a Boy Scout camp, and there was another community camp. So there was just...
that's country. Staten Island was country.
Yes, and now that's all wall-to-wall houses now.
Yes. It's now city.
It doesn't look anything like...
and then you moved from Staten Island to the Bronx.
Well, I left Staten Island, as I said, to go to the seminary.
Okay.
I didn't wind up in the Bronx until I came out of the Army and started going to Manhattan College.
I understand. Okay.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about your mother and your father. What were they like? What did they do? What were they good at?
My mother was a person who from the time she was very young. She was the oldest of 3 children. Her father, my grandfather, was a carpenter. He built the house that I lived in most of my childhood with his own hands, literally carrying lumber on his shoulder from a mile away where he got off the trolley up into the what was woods at the time. So she grew up with that, and she was the type of person who felt that if you were doing the right thing, you should stick to it no matter what came at you. Not that you should be foolish or anything, but don't back off if you think you're right.
Committed.
My mother, well, she raised 7 children as well as taking care of her own parents. At various times, we had uncles and aunts and cousins in our house, so we had a packed house at various times.
Were your parents both born in this country?
Yes. My mother came from Tuckahoe, New York, and my father came from Philadelphia. My father was born into wealth, what you would call wealth at the time. His father made and produced pianos. And there still are some Hannan pianos in Philadelphia. My father remembers as a young boy, both his parents were dead by the time he was 11. But he remembers having to learn a musical instrument. He remembers the main room in his house was a ballroom type with pianos all around.
Wow.
They had a yacht at a nearby lake. But when his mother died in childbirth with his youngest brother, and when his father died, my father was taken in by one of his aunts. A couple of there were 6 brothers. Some were put in a home, some hit the street, because they were old enough. And but none of them got any of the money or whatever was left of the father's business.
Right.
That's the way they did things then. There were no protections for kids. But my father worked, I guess, from the time he was 13 or 14 until he was 62. He worked, one of his jobs that he had the longest, he was a longshoreman. And he was a longshoreman at the time that you did stuff with your hands and hooks, on the waterfront type. A lot of brutality and
for sure.
The only time I saw my father cry was when he sat at the table thinking of some of the things that he saw and he couldn't talk about.
Wow.
Because he knew that he'd be dumped off the side of a pier and disappear.
Yeah, on the waterfront.
So he also worked in what they called a sanitarium. It was a farm colony, which was like a mile and a half from our house, taking care of sick people and elderly. And he was a bartender. He had several jobs. He always had a couple of jobs. Having 7 kids, that's what you needed to do.
Strong role model, obviously. Yeah. But so was your mother, if you the way you described
And my mother, my mother
you can see both of their qualities in you, actually.
Well, my mother, besides, she raised us to a certain point, and she went back to work, and she was head of a department in the New York Telephone Company. So she also worked many years and retired from that job.
And where are you in the birth order of the siblings?
I'm in the middle of the 7. There are 3 older and 3 younger.
Okay.
6 years on either side.
Is everybody still living, Eddie? All of them?
Yes.
Thank God. Great.
My mother and father, as I said, my father passed away this past June, just before I retired. My mother died about 6 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And but they both lived very happy lives.
What's your earliest childhood memory? Well, one of the earliest childhood memories, if you have one that you can.
I remember that my family always celebrated with as many other extended family members on a Labor Day weekend, and it was a time when our house was just bursting with people, and there was a lot of song, and we didn't need musical instruments really, but it was nice if somebody could play a guitar or something to start us off.
Yeah, great.
And I still remember the lyrics to a lot of the old songs.
Isn't that wonderful?
That my parents, and it wasn't just on Labor Day that they sang together, but that was a time where
strong family
ate
attachment.
And we sang, and it went over into the next day, and you got up, and it kept going, for the weekend, and then everybody went back to school on Tuesday.
I don't know about anybody watching, but that has such a nostalgic appeal to me, what you've just described. It's like in America or a life that we have watched disappear. Maybe for some people it hasn't. Maybe for some families it hasn't.
I hope not. I mean, my family, when we get together still.
And maybe west of the Mississippi, it's alive and well. I don't know whether here on the East Coast it's...
Before my parents died, they had 22 grandchildren and about 35 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
And those, the grandchildren, who are my nieces and nephews, they treasure that.
Yes.
Those
memories.
Yes, they grew up with us coming together. Christmas grab bag is still a time of year when we all come together.
That's great. What adult, other than your parents, perhaps played an important role in your early years? Was there some significant adult attachment that you made that you can think of? An older person that you connected with?
Well, probably several, but I know that my Uncle Joe was, he lived with us for different periods of time, and he never married. But he's a saint. He's dead. And I remember the priest saying at his funeral that if Joe isn't in heaven, nobody has a chance to get there. But from the time I was very young, he would always do things for people without expecting any return or even to talk about it. And even up until the time he died, he had, in retirement, he had a schedule. And all he would say was, well, I have to go. And he would never say where he was going. But we found out that he would be going to mow someone's lawn, pick someone up to go to a doctor, take someone shopping, you name it. Whatever someone needed, since he had a car and he was able to drive and he was physically able to do, that's what he did.
He sounds like he was a magnificent teacher as well.
Well, for us, with my parents having the financial strain that they had with 7 children, I know one of the things he did was he bought new suits for my brothers and me at Easter time. That was, he just did good things.
Did you know your grandparents?
I knew my grandfather, my mother's father. The other 3 were gone before I was aware. My grandfather, Pop Brennan, he taught me some basic carpentry. And like I say, he built the house that I lived in my early childhood. He worked on various ships. There's a couple of that are still running now, doing the woodwork.
Oh, really? Okay. So he was a cabinet maker or a carpenter of a skilled craftsman.
He did, right. And
where was he born, Eddie? Was he born?
He was. I think that he was born in Tuckahoe, also upstate New York.
So your family roots really go back a long time into this to this country.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we've been here for a while. His name was Brennan, and he also had a stubbornness about him.
There's the quality that shows up.
This is what I have to do. This is what I'm going to do.
Talking about talking about that quality and the stubbornness. Recently, with a conversation with Joe Purcell, as a matter of fact, he was commenting on the kind of personality that was groomed in Brentwood, at least in the high school, on the part of teachers, and a lot of very individualistic traits in the teachers here. I want to ask you about your involvement with the association, with the Brentwood Teachers Association, with the union, or with the politics of teaching. At any point along the line, were you involved in the union, or were you involved in the organization?
Well, always, as I said, I had always had 2 or 3 jobs, so my time was limited as far as being involved as a representative or anything. But any time that we needed to make a stand, I saw, whether it was to picket in front of the administration building, I was involved in that.
I remember those days.
To stand up for any teacher who was picked on for no good reason. I knew that I had to be involved, because I always thought that what you let be done to one person can easily be done to you sooner or later. Not that people were being bullied or anything, but whenever it came up, that's what we did. I did notice that we sort of had 2 personalities here at the high school, a Sondling personality and a R.O.B.S personality.
That's interesting. Yes, I remember that.
Having been in both buildings, I think that the people in the R.O.B.S as a group are a tougher lot. They're less likely to take anything, standing up or lying down or whatever. They question more, and it's just a different atmosphere.
But that changed periodically, wouldn't you think?
It would change according to who was moved from one building to another. But I think that it maintains itself for whatever reason. Well, because you still have some of the old cadre in both buildings. And it showed, for example, I remember going out to the Colony Hill when it existed, when we had those meetings. It showed, you saw a different personality among the high school faculty as opposed to the elementary people. The elementary people were, okay, whatever you want us to do. The high school people, give me that microphone. I want to tell you something.
It's a culture. It's a culture.
And I remember being impressed by that. I say, wow, there's some really strong people here at the high school.
I can remember the same feelings of pride. Do you remember any of your elementary school teachers?
Yes, I remember several. I remember...
Tell me about what you remember about them.
Well, I remember my 5th grade teacher. Both 4th and 5th grade were women who were also mothers of children in the school. And Mrs. Tuff, her daughter was in my class, and she would call her daughter Marjorie. Read, please,
And this was in Staten Island now?
Yeah, this was on Staten Island at a Catholic grammar school. And I remember Mrs. Tuff was very human, because she would get in screaming fights with her daughter if Marjorie would resort to the, Ma, I don't want to do this type thing, We all said, well, maybe we could do that too. But Sister Beatrice, my 8th grade teacher, she was, from the time you started in that school, even though you may not have had Sister Beatrice, you were afraid of her. And part of it was her name, but the other part of it was she used that big brass belt to bang you over the head. And she wouldn't hesitate to punch out a student, no matter how big he was. If he was too big, she would pull a chair over and stand on it and punch. I remember my brother-in-law, who didn't even go to that school, he told me much later that he was afraid of her. But I came to understand that she beat into us a lot of knowledge that stayed with me. all through high school. In fact, I very rarely had to study grammar because she just drummed it into us.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And that was important.
Did you have a favorite high school teacher? I mean, some kids in school would speak about so-and-so being their favorite teacher. And did you have one?
I had Christian brothers, and I think that I marvel at what they did. One of the things that you can identify with, they put out report cards every 2 weeks.
Oh, jeez.
And they wrote the grades in. So
Oh,
we know how difficult that is.
Yes.
But they were professional teachers. They knew their subject areas very well. And the sad thing is that many of them used brutality to keep order in the class. And sometimes it wasn't absolutely necessary, where a kid got punched around or slapped around. But
that strikes me as being very old world. There was a lot of that came to this country from traditions in other parts of the world.
I can remember my father saying that if they went home and told their parents they were hit, they got hit again.
Hit again, yeah. I guess within our 30 years in the classroom, we saw all, if not most of that disappear.
Right. Well, we were talking to Joe Purcell the other day. He mentioned how that existed here in Brentwood when he first started.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I saw a little of that when I first came, but like you say, that doesn't exist here.
No.
There isn't any laying on of hands in any kind of fashion here. And I think one of the negatives that came out of that was that, well, now a teacher is not allowed to touch in any way.
That's true.
Yes. That's kind of a scary thing.
Yes,
because
it sure is.
We all know that
the fear of an allegation or
certain
an
ways
accusation.
that you can touch a student sometimes can make a big difference in how they are motivated.
Yeah. So many questions in so little time. What were your best subjects in school? What were the subjects you didn't like while you were in high school? In high school, I guess.
In high school, I didn't know at the time, but I enjoyed geometry. And someone told me later on it was because it has a lot to do with logic rather than mathematics.
Yeah.
And again, when I went to the seminary, logic was one of my favorite subjects. We were taught in Latin. Just imagine yourself taking a course like metaphysics, and a teacher comes in and he lectures in Latin, and your notes are in Latin. I look back at that and I marvel that I got through some of that. With all
of the, excuse me, go finish what you're going to say.
I had a Christian brother, Aloysius, who taught me Latin. Again, he used a bit of the fist to get it into your head, but he also, I could see in his eyes and his manner that he really loved his subject and he wanted you to learn it.
Eddie, with all the experience that you'd had with physical coercion in the classroom, put it that way, from the elementary all the way through your seminary, all the way through the training at the seminary, you are such a gentle man. You are such a soft-spoken, compassionate guy who obviously from the very beginning of your teaching career never employed any of those tactics with your students.
No, I never.
Were you prepared in other training ways for the job of teaching here in Brentwood, or do you think that your educational courses or training that you might have had to be a teacher left you hanging in the wind, so to speak, when you got into your first teaching experience? You know what I'm trying to ask you?
Yeah, I think that in the seminary you learn a lot of ways of dealing with people, how to talk to them, how to above all look at a person and see more than what's there before your eyes, to try to get something inside that person to come out. And if you can't do that, then you're not worth your salt. I mean, it just doesn't work to beat something into or out of a person. Many of the courses that I took in catechetical theology, which has to do with teaching catechism, emphasize the idea of response. That you, as a teacher, you initiate something and you're trying to get a response. And the student does that to you also. There's education going on in both directions.
Yeah, very true. Very true. You have contact at this point with students that you had in class over the years? Do any of your students
Yes,
keep in contact?
every once in a while. Sometimes, sadly, at funerals, I bump into people.
Are there any people that you learned with, that you learned under, let's say, that you maintained the contact with over the years? The reason I'm asking the question is very often people will say teachers can have a profound effect upon someone's life. Sometimes those people get back and say thank you or keep in touch, and sometimes you never know,
right?
Even though it has happened.
Only a couple of times. I have gone back to the seminary and visited with some of those priests, but many of them get moved around.
Oh, for sure.
In Christian Brothers, for example, none of them are at St. Peter's. None of the ones that I had.
Yes.
But
that's different.
I continue to try to, at least in some way, pay back. I try to donate a little money to each of the schools that I went to. I feel that's important, There's no way that I can pay. But.
Okay. No, of course not. I want to ask you a couple of questions as we wrap up here, though. Of all the things that you've accomplished professionally, what are you most proud of?
That's a hard question. Professionally, I guess
hold off for a second, because I want to throw a part B in there too, which may give you a different avenue that answers the question in the same way. Is there anything that you would like to have been able to accomplish during your years in the classroom that you feel upon leaving you weren't able to achieve?
Well, I think some of that has to do with technology. I know that there are things that can be done that we can't do here at Brentwood because we don't have the money and the technology to do it. But in my imagination, I know that it can be done. Right here in the studio, we have kinds of equipment that it would be nice if you had it in each class, or at least in many classes, so that you could utilize it in the teaching experience. But I did accomplish that in a sense of using the hands-on dramatic skills that I have in trying to get across to students that they can learn through drama. I do get a bang out of that, and that's probably why I'm still back here.
Sure, of course. It's fun. I got 3 questions for you now, and then we'll call it a wrap here. Looking back, would you do it differently if you had it to do over again? That is, going into teaching. Would you have done something else?
I don't know. Like I say, my life seemed like it was directed by another hand, even though I thought I was directing it. And I've arrived here in some ways in spite of myself. There are times when I know that I probably should have been dead before, but I got here, and I did things from day to day that got me here. I enjoyed getting up and going to work each day, and sometimes I didn't plan what I was going to do next summer.
Yes.
I did what I had to do for this week or this month.
Okay. Eddie, if your experience for all those years could speak to new teachers, people who are just beginning a career, what would it say to them? What would you say to them?
I think you always have to try to communicate what it is that you're trying to do, not just with students. One of the things that I see that always worked for me was that I shared with my colleagues in all departments. Yes. And many times I got feedback that was very helpful. I don't see that happening enough. And it's not because people don't necessarily want to do it. Sometimes it's because they don't have the time within the teaching day. And I spent many hours after school working with colleagues and developing curriculum and trying to find new ways to do the things that we did before. And I think a person has to almost have a desire for change. Yeah. Not drastic change necessarily, but how can I do this differently if necessary?
Rather than getting comfortable.
Maybe different from first period and second period.
Yes. Yeah.
You get caught in a trap, I think, if you get bogged down in sameness.
Yes. Yeah.
I like the challenge of having to improvise sometimes.
Improvise now. The last question or the last issue. Is there anything that I left out that you want to comment on? Is there anything that we haven't, that needs to be said before we wrap here?
About Ed Hannan?
About Ed Hannan. About American education. About Brentwood. About Ed Hannan.
Well, I hope that people in general come back to a realization of how valuable teachers are and how important they are. I know there's a lot of talk nowadays.
Yes.
Trying to control teachers and trying to get rid of the bad teacher. And it always seems always the easy thing to focus on.
Sure.
Something that's no good.
Yeah, teachers have become a scapegoat as late.
I mean, it's like in Vietnam, their focus was on the bullets and bombs. And there were so many guys in Vietnam doing good things.
You and I have spoken about the waste in war, and we've also spoken about the waste of people in the profession. That there are so many gifts. There are so many
right here in this high school.
Yes.
There are people.
We can't afford to let anybody go to waste.
Untapped talent.
No, people are too valuable, too different, too precious. You're precious, Ed Hannan.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.